Hamlet defines suffering as having to endure the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. It is like Apollo shooting arrows of disease at the Greek encampment during the Trojan War, described in Homer's Iliad. In the ancient world, it was believed that Apollo, the god of the sun, who rode in a blazing chariot drawing the sun across the sky, and Artemis, the goddess of the moon, could shoot arrows, bringing disease, sudden death, failings of old age, much like Cupid, who shoots arrows of love, but these were arrows of misfortune. It is also a well-chosen metaphor for the arbitrary nature of misfortune. It may hit you, but if you are lucky, it may miss and hit someone else. The metaphor also emphasizes or ennobles the will to end suffering, to stop the demoralizing aspect of having to endure attacks without being able to respond effectively. This is exactly how my mother felt when she suffered a TIA. She was horrified at being struck with paralysis, and she was in terror that life was no longer safe. She got into the exact same state of meditation as Hamlet. Is it better to face the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or is it better to oppose them by ending them? She answered this question for herself, and once when we were having lunch together, she looked up to me and said, "After lunch, why don't you take me to the morgue? Let's make plans." For her, this was no way to live. Life can do this, and we can feel as helpless as if we were surrounded by sea. Simon and Garfunkel also used the analogy of a sea of troubles with their song. Like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down. Here the problem of suffering is answered with companionship. For the Greek poet Aeschylus, however, he found great meaning in suffering, as if we climb to the highest summit that is wisdom. He wrote, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom." Nietzsche is also a strong advocate for suffering. He wrote, "To those human beings who are of any concern to me, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill-treatment, indignities, profound self-contempt, the torture of self-mistrust, and the wretchedness of the vanquished." It might sound crazy, but in a way, I can see what he's getting at. How many of you have been ill-treated by someone and thought, if only this person could experience the same ill-treatment, they would know not to do it? Through suffering, then, comes the knowledge of how not to treat someone, and it can become the breaking point to launch civil rights movements and sparks to revolutions. The Buddha very much acknowledged suffering. In fact, Buddha teaches his followers to expect constant suffering in life and strive to detach themselves from the immediate circumstances and the anxious spasms of what Buddhists call the monkey mind. This is done through reflection and meditation. Nietzsche says that the bothersome past must be forgotten if it is not to become the gravedigger of the present. Happiness becomes happiness through the ability to forget. Anyone who cannot set himself down on the crest of the moment, forgetting everything from the past, who is not capable of standing on a single point like a goddess of victory without dizziness or fear, will never know what happiness is. What I've shown here is with these examples, Hamlet thinks the really big questions that great thinkers throughout the ages have addressed and continue to address. I remember a lecture I watched just last year from the professor at Yale University who teaches the philosophy of death. He acknowledged how many people are for the side of suffering because they believe this life to be a gift from God. And you must accept God's gift. To commit suicide is to reject it. He then went on to ask, is God a bully? Is God big and strong? And when he gives you a gift, let's call life a gift like a pie, does God sit there and say, eat it? Even if it goes rotten, I'm going to make you eat it. With this analogy, he suggests that if life does go wrong, say terminal illness, severe burns all over the body, great suffering, God does not expect you to endure through it, and he believes that an enlightened society will allow or even assist one to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. So we have considered closely the first lines of Hamlet's speech on life or death and weighed both sides of the argument. I will read the lines once more. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them.